Today's podcast is with Ola Stenegärd, who is the Director of Product Design for India Motorcycles. Was previously at BMW, also worked at Saab and Öhlins back in the day. He's a through and through motorcycle aficionado and great designer. And I've known Ola for many years. I worked for BMW motorcycles for a little bit, worked on a few projects like the S1000 RR, doing some colors and graphics for it. And it's really nice to catch up with Ola. It's been a long time since we spoke, and the podcast was a pleasure to make. So hope you enjoy it too.
I have this like it's my own homemade theory, but like when I see new motorcycle concepts that are powered by electric vehicles, I always and cars too for that matter, I always do the ICE test. I call it the ICE test, internal combustion engine test. So if you remove the power plant and you put a traditional power plant into that electric vehicle, is it still a really good vehicle? Does it bring anything new to the market? Or does it become a really weird and odd exercise? Because it seems to me like a lot of vehicles, cars, bikes, whatever you have, just because it's electric, they take the opportunity to do something that is like so far out of the boundaries that you're basically throwing the ball way too far, and the excuse is that it's powered by EV. It's electric, it's an EV. So that kind of gives you the reason to do really weird and odd things. And I don't necessarily think that is the answer. So I always do the ICE test. And like when you look at the Tesla, for example, it's still a really innovative car, right? When you look at it, the design is beautiful. It brought a lot of new things to the market that the rest of the car industry just hadn't done on a scale like Tesla, if you know what I mean. And but the power plant wasn't like an excuse to do that. It was still innovative, right? They could put
Do you
whatever
think
power
that
plant
it's like the
into it.
same customer? Like, are they going like if you put like an electric or you create an electric motorcycle, are you going after you just cannibalizing sales from your other customer, or are you actually trying to push into a whole new customer segment?
I think the electric motorcycle market is first of all behind behind the car market quite a bit. Um, I mean, it's still we're still in this transitional phase where the auto industry was probably 10 years ago. At least that's what I'm thinking. So it's still going to take time to convince the customers that electric can be better, cooler, can replace your ICE or be a complement to your regular ride. But I think it takes a long time till you have this like full shift. There's a lot of things that has to fall in place. That can also be triggers. It can be legislation, obviously. That's pushing really hard and getting closer and
Mm.
closer. Also to the motorcycles, we've been surfing along a little bit on the side, but legislation is getting harder, tracking down also on bikes. You have the social acceptance phenomena. The more silent and electric vehicles you have on the road, all of a sudden the motorcycles stand out as loud and noisy and smelly. And even though legislation might hit them, you still have this issue that they might not be socially accepted anymore. So it's the noise. You already see roads up in the Alps, like the favorite roads are closing down because motorcyclers are noisy. So there's a
Wow.
lot of different uh, things that I think will trigger the customer to go electric in the future.
How
Um,
do you navigate that as a global brand? Because there's massive differences also in the markets between like American market and like you said,
yeah,
Switzerland or
absolutely.
Germany. So
Yeah.
how do you balance that difference in regulation and acceptance? And
No, I think everyone is struggling. I mean, it's really hard to keep up, and things are changing as we speak, right? So
mm,
it's really hard to keep up, and you got to stay on your toes and keep your ears to the ground for everything that is going on. Because also developing a bike takes time, right? If you want to do a good motorcycle or a good vehicle, 3 to 5 years is like that's what you need to do a good car or a good motorcycle.
How
So,
often do you get the chance to come up with like, a concept for like a blue sky concept as opposed to kind of like a, just like a new generation of an existing platform?
well, how do you answer that? It depends on the company and what kind of cadence you have in your platforms, right? Um, most companies run like 10, 12-year platforms. So every 10, 12 years, you have the opportunity to do something completely new and revamp the whole lineup for that platform. And of course,
Where
that's
does
super
an idea for
exciting,
like a
right?
new segment come from though? Like if you have an idea, like if somebody in your team or you or upper management, like how does like a new like innovative idea come into existence?
That is so complicated because it also really depends on the company you work for. But generally, you always, I mean, it can come from different. I mean, you always have, every company has a certain fund for innovation, right? So that's one source within the company where you can discover new products or new cool vehicles, and then you have to start to think like, okay, where can this fit? Is there a white space for this? Is there an urge for this vehicle? And then on the flip side of the coin, you constantly look at new opens in the market, where it could maybe be uh, like a one brand segment that is totally dominated by one or two brands. Well, then obviously you have a good opportunity to also go in there and score quite a bit of volume. So you have all these dynamics in a company, and when all of you agree basically in the leadership team that this is an opportunity, then you usually take the next step. And as you do all these different projects that are born in different areas of the company, eventually some of them filter up, and they turn out to be really, really good ideas, and you decide to pull the trigger. And of course,
Is it more often that an idea filters down or filters up?
I I think I don't know. It goes both ways. I mean, you it's got to be a healthy balance, I think, of both.
Mm,
So there's also a lot of top-down ideas. Someone has an idea, of course, in the leadership team. They see a trend, they see socio-economic movements, whatever it might be, that triggers these new ideas or new opportunities. So
that's a wonderfully diplomatic answer you just gave over
no, but
there.
it is. I mean, it's also the truth. It is.
Yeah,
There's
it's
that's
very balanced.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
if you live in a healthy, OEM company, that's where how it should be, I think.
yeah.
And they should go both ways. There should be ideas coming down from the top, otherwise the top is not interested, right? And there should
How do you
be,
get the top interested? Do you have like a pre-development process where you kind of like come up with
yeah.
initial ideas and
Now
then
I'm
you'll
in a
present
company
them?
where everyone is like, of course, well, motorcycle industry in general, I think everyone is really enthusiastic about what they do. Uh, you don't go into the motorcycle industry just because you don't have anything else to do. Like, you really love the product, and
That's true.
everyone I met has a like a really burning passion for motorcycle. And it's the same for us Indian motorcyclists, right? Everyone is very, very passionate about what we do. So those yeah that's it's those conversations are very easy, if you know what I mean. Everyone is on the uh same part of the, playing the same game. So that is like,
How,
that's inspiring.
how do you balance like, this kind of need for innovation with like an equally strong need to kind of like, make sure you maintain the heritage of the brand? Like, and
Wow,
what,
you're
like
putting
these,
me on
because
the
innovation
spot,
is a
like
bit of
all
a
this.
buzzword.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But it's like all these things that, you know, in the daily work, you don't think much about it because you're so into it. You need a certain you need you need a certain progression for each bike. But of course, when you work with like a brand like Indian, there's a lot of heritage in there, right?
Mm,
Um, but the cool thing about Indian, I think, is we don't come with a heavy luggage. So Indian was always a very innovative brand, so it's easier for us to go into new directions and try new things, like the FTR, for example. It's easier to also bring new, like the Challenger. Challenger platform where you have a liquid cooled cruiser touring bike, or the Scout also. Like these are pretty, like in the cruiser market or the big touring market, those are pretty avant-garde moves, right? But I think for us it's a little bit easier to do that. We're a smaller company, we're very dynamic, and we have a heritage of strong innovation. So it's okay that we're doing those things.
I mean, BMW is probably another example where it's almost like a schizophrenic brand. I mean, it's a very strong brand, but you have your kind of like, your amazing classic R90 model, which I know came from
Yeah,
you, sitting alongside these really, innovative modern electric scooters, and then you have the whole adventure segment. So you have like these very kind of like distinct categories within the brand.
yeah.
How do you still maintain a cohesive brand when you have such diverse product offerings?
I think it's hard. It's not just BMW. There's a couple of different companies out there that have really large portfolios, and uh, it's tricky because when you look at different segments, and you know this, right? I mean, you have played this game long enough that if you go to the racetrack, you will meet and talk to people that they have no clue what other motorcycles your brand is actually making. And I've been there and I've experienced that myself. And I think I think some companies are doing it real. I mean, we're doing the same way. We're trying to be very focused on the segment. You got to have a couple of things that run through as a red, uh, like a thread through the brand. That is like brand, call it brand heritage. I mean, for us, of course, history is very important, right? We really try to pay a lot of attention to craftsmanship, like the details really have um, hand handmade feel, so to speak. You should see that it's not just whipped out in CAD and like automated, or it's like we pay a lot of attention to details,
I
and
mean, you're going
that's
into
running
brand values
through.
here, right? Like
Yeah, but
Indian
it
brand value is then quality, craftsmanship.
yeah, but that should run through all of them, right? But then of course you have very distinct features for an FTR that you don't have on a air-cooled cruiser or touring bike. The aesthetics are very different, and they should
Mm.
be. You can't have like a blanket aesthetics like over all those bikes, because that's not going to be appreciated. If you're riding an air-cooled cruiser, you want a clean, simple bike that is easy to customize. If you're riding an FTR, you want something that is way more muscular and more modern, and maybe a little bit more chiseled, and have a lot of super nice details, performance parts, carbon fiber, things like that. So you really have to pay attention to the segments and what they actually want, because it's not always the crossover, right? And even if you have a customer that likes both, he wants those different flavors depending on what he's riding. Does that make sense? Do you know
So,
what I mean?
so yeah, completely.
I don't want
But
to
so
find
what
cruiser
then?
brakes on my FTR, if you know what I mean. So
what
yeah,
like what then is the red thread that what is then the glue that brings these all together into one
the
brand?
again, for us, the history is super important. So you should have this sense of history that FTR is racing. That's a part of our history, right? That is very strong. Even if you can't point to a part specifically and say, "Oh, that looks like the old, you know, 101 Scout," that's not the point. The heritage part for an FTR is the heritage to racing and innovation. Um, and then if you look at a Chief, for example, then you will actually find lines and details that takes you arcs straight back to the original Chief, and on that it's okay. That's the heritage link. And
Mhm.
craftsmanship goes through all of them, right? That we pay a lot of attention to every little bit and piece. FTR, Challenger touring bike, or if it's a Chief, it doesn't matter. We pay a lot of attention to all those little bits and pieces. We try.
I mean,
Nothing should just
is
fly under
it,
the radar.
it's like one of the nice things, I guess, of working with such a like a historic brand is you do have this like wealth of history to go back
Yeah,
into.
Yeah.
And you probably don't have that many discussions around what the brand actually stands for, right? Like everybody there, or do you?
I think everyone has a pretty clear picture, and the part that I didn't mention is this, which I love, because if you're a designer, it's where you wanna have that as part of your as a foundation in your brand, is this pioneering spirit that you're constantly looking for new roads, new opportunities. You want to do things maybe a bit different, but you want to explore and you want to innovate. So
Mhm.
FTR is like that, right? It's an American, it has its roots in the dirt, in flat track, something very, very American. But it's like it's a new take on it, right? And then you bring it from the dirt to the street. And to me, that's a very, yeah, it's a good example of this pioneering spirit. You're looking for something new, new paths, new roads. And the Challenger touring bike is the same. It's a liquid cooled touring bike, an American touring bike, and no one has done that before, really, not at least that scale, right? So
Mm.
that's also a totally new thing. Like most would say, oh, it's got to be air cooled, it's traditional, it's American. No, it can be liquid cooled, and it's going to be a much better bike for that. And that's also
So
like another
embracing modern
way.
technology, but still kind of
Yeah,
harking
looking
back
for a
to
new
the
way.
past.
Yeah, looking for a new way to create a product that still fits in this traditional American segment. So
Mm.
does that make sense? That sounds
Yeah,
really.
yeah, totally.
It's getting deep
So
here.
you you've been at the top level of motorbike design for many years, like BMW and now at Polaris, Indian.
Yeah,
Like, how was the
thank you.
transition from being a designer sketching bikes to being a creative director managing a team sketching bikes? How
I
did that transition happen? And
well
and do
for
you, I mean,
yeah.
like a follow-on question, like the roles clearly have different skill requirements. Like what do you think makes a good designer versus what makes a good manager?
Wow. All right. Now I have to really think. uh, I mean, the day I was promoted to manager, the first realization I had, and I think this is a hard bit when you're a designer and you love to design stuff, because when you're working on stuff, like I love to design motorcycles, like be in the project. You're finding the best solution for every bit of the part with the project engineers, with the studio engineers, with the whole team, like being in a team, because you're never alone as a designer. Sometimes the designer is like put on a pedestal and stuff, but that's not how it is, right? You're in a team. As the bike launches, sometimes you end up in the limelight. I have no, I mean, it's just how it is sometimes, but in reality, you're part of a team, and being part of that team, creating a product, it is exhilarating. I loved every second of it. You work with a lot of different people, uh, different parts of the bike, whether it's test riders or frame engineers, motor engineers, it doesn't matter, right? But everyone has that one goal to create the very, very best that you can do. And to be in that team is like, it's amazing. It's like,
Mm.
I don't do drugs, I don't drink, but I imagine it must be something like that. And when you finally
It-
roll out that bike and you know that you've been part of that team and it's so intense, the creation, I mean, it's amazing. So when you then, it's like I someone compared it to soccer. Like when you're a soccer player on the field, you're part of the team, you're winning and you're scoring, and then one day someone says, "You're so good at what you're doing, you should now become the coach." And now we want you to coach the team to continue, to play at this level. And
mm.
the first thing you have to accept is like, okay, now I'm not going to be at the field anymore. So some might dread that because they love being on the field and actually kicking that ball so much that they can never adapt to become a good manager, I guess. So for me, that was my first insight. I was like, okay, now I'm going to be a manager. So I just right away had to accept that I'm not going to be sketching anymore. I'm not going to be, working with the clay modelers and the engineers. I'm probably not going to be on the test track, riding around Nardin 300 something kilometers and being part of the aerodynamic team and stuff like that. You're not going to do that anymore, and you have to accept that. But then this other part really, for me at least, it was equally exhilarating because now you become part of, first you becoming the coach basically that now coaches the team, and you have to really bring out the best in the players, if that makes sense, and get them on the right direction and make sure that you don't have a lot of solo players, for example, that you still play as a team, right? But you're also part of this, of the other coaches, let's say. You become part of the leadership team, and now you can affect the company in a whole different way. You're not designing one bike, but you're designing 5 bikes, 10 bikes, 30 bikes, and that's equally exhilarating. You're starting to design the whole portfolio, and to be part of that creation, like on a whole different scale. When you embrace that, and if you love motorcycle, that is just as exhilarating, or maybe even more. As no, it's the same. It's just different than actually working on a motorcycle. So that's how it was for me. But I see a lot of designers, they struggle with that, right? They want to become a manager, but when they become a manager, they still so badly want to put tape on the clay model, and they still want to sketch, that they struggle with that part, right?
I struggle with that for a long time. Yeah, I think that like the way to get out of that is you just have to accept it, and you need to really like. I mean,
Yeah.
you phrased it very well. You need to kind of acknowledge that that life and that way of working is you have to leave it behind, and you have to move on to this new way of working, which has pros and cons the same way as just being a regular designer does.
But it's still I mean, for you too, right? It's still exciting, isn't it? Even when
Mm.
when you're the coach. I mean, I love it, right? It's creative, but in a whole different kind of way. Don't you find it the same?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, what I find interesting is like what the difference in like character traits you need to have.
Yeah.
Like there's definitely a difference, and some of them I didn't possess at the time when I was starting to shift more
No,
into a
no,
managerial
not me
position,
either.
and I kind of
Yeah.
had to learn how to behave under certain situations. Maybe how to be more diplomatic, like we were
Yeah.
talking about earlier. Um, what other characteristics do you think you need as a
Well,
manager?
well, just on that note that you just said, I was very, very lucky, right? Like, even if I worked at Indian before, like in early 2000, I worked at Indian. Um, I before that I worked at Saab. I did cars for a couple of years because it's a great foundation for just getting into the industry, and then BMW, and now Indian again. But I think one of the keys for me, or I guess for any good man or anything you do, probably, I've been really lucky and always had amazing mentors along the road. Someone that always took me under the wing and taught me the rights and the wrongs, and led me along the way, and helped me to uh, yeah, to do the transition from designer to coach, but also like as the team grows and what you need to focus on. And I I for sure could never have done it without that. I mean, there is no way. And
Mm.
they kind of always put the mirror in front of me, if you know what I mean. And I remember, especially when, you know, I think it was like a year, or no, it was probably a year or 2 years into when I was first like running a team, being a manager, and I was really struggling. You're still micromanaging, you still want to be in every little detail, and it's hard for you to let go. And you're running this big team, and I was crashing and burning pretty hard. And so I sat down with his name was Thomas Plod. He's kind of a legend in the industry, and he was my mentor, and motorcycle freak through and through. So we sat down, and he's like, "Yeah, what is the most important part of your job?" I was like, "Well, making sure that all the clay models are getting done, and da 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 da." It's like, "No, no, no, no. That's not your job." I was like, "Okay, what is my job?" "Well, to make sure that all the bikes are looking good when they come out of the factory. Obviously, that's my job." "No, no, no. That's also not your job." I was like, "What is my job then?" Now I have totally lost. But your job is to make sure that your team is doing good and that your team is inspired and that they're doing well. Because if
Mm,
you make sure of that, all the other things, they will happen by itself. That's your only
yeah.
job. You've got to make sure that your team is doing well, staying inspired. That's your job. It
It
was,
sounds like you had some good mentors, definitely. I think that I either wasn't receptive enough to the mentors or I never found a good mentor. So I tend to learn the hard way, unfortunately. But
yeah, but that
so,
was that
like,
was a hard one for me because you want to. I mean, I was trying and trying and trying, and finally I was like, dude, what am I doing wrong? Like it doesn't work.
mm,
I was
make
stressing
your team
myself.
happy.
Working longer and longer hours and just nothing. Yeah, you got to crash and burn, right? And I totally did. That's how it was. But he helped me and got me back in order and pointed me in the right direction. And that happened a couple of times. I think that probably happens to everyone, right? So I
I
think
think
mentors
calling
are
your position a
important.
coach is quite a good title as well. I never really thought of it in quite those terms before. I thought like manager or creative director, but actually coach is that's a really good way to look at it, I think.
I That's something I heard along the road also, but I found it a very good explanation because I mean, if you're into sport, you still love ice hockey, right, or soccer or whatever it is, and you still gotta love it even if you're a coach. But it's a change of perspective, right? You're not inside
Mm.
the field, you're outside, but it's just as exhilarating. It's not boring being a coach, if you know what I mean.
So
It's
can you share your approach to building and coaching and inspiring a creative team?
wow. Well, you're trying hard every day, but I always feel I'm not doing my job good enough. So that's one thing. I'm always looking for things to do better. But I think you really have to listen to the team, right? It's easy just and you get sidetracked. I get sidetracked. Everyone gets sidetracked, and then you can lose focus. But I always come back to the point where you have to listen to your team and make sure that you're kind of you're protecting their back. You're trying to remove the obstacles so they can do their job and stay creative. And also when I've been hiring designers, I learned that from someone else too. Always hire people that are better than yourself. And I'm not saying like I'm super good or anything, but I that was my context, so to speak, or my reference point is like, okay, I can do these things, but I need someone that can do more than that. And I always looked for people that were better than me, basically. And that I think that's also important, right?
Mm.
And uh, and
It
then
sounds
it's
also
it's
like
the
you like being a mentor. Like you had good mentors, but it sounds like you also you mentor the people who work for you too.
well, yeah, that you're probably right. I mean, that's my goal. I'm not always doing a good job. Like we're getting out on really thin ice here because I mean, I just remember how Thomas always put that mirror in front of you, so you always have to reflect on yourself. And I know, you're always trying. I mean, that's always trying to do a better job. But of course, everyone's human, right? You can't be perfect all
Mm.
the time, so it is what it is. But at least I have the ambition of trying to do that. Yeah, that's
Do
probably
you
a good
think it's
one.
harder nowadays with home officing, or is it actually easier? I kind of have mixed thoughts on that because I find sometimes like my studio is in Munich and I have this little office in Hamburg where I live. And I find when I go down to Munich, I mean, it's great to have like the personal contact with people and the kind of chit chat between the meetings and stuff. But, you know, most of the time in the office, people are just looking at the screen in front of
Yeah,
themselves.
yeah, yeah.
So, like, when I'm there, I kind of like, I kind of have to go behind them, and I like
It's like
it's
fold the
almost
screen
easier to go
down.
to my desk, and then I'll like connect with them via the computer, even though they're just sitting behind me anyway. So,
Yeah,
actually, like working remotely is actually really efficient. I think it was my mum who actually said that initially. She was like, she realized at one point that all of her children were spending like a huge amount of time just looking at computer screens, and she had no idea how to use a computer at that time. And so she sent herself on a computer course to learn how to use basic like turn the thing on, like how to open a window, what a browser is, Skype, and all the rest of it, because she wanted to be inside of the screen so she could talk to us.
that's so funny. But That's pretty cool that she did that, though. That she actually challenged
Yeah, yeah,
herself to do that.
uh, yeah.
So
It's impressive.
I I don't know. I guess for me, but it's also how I always wanted to work myself. I think the freedom is the most important because everyone is different, and I discovered that during the COVID years also, that some people thrive in the studio. They need to be there, even if they don't talk to anyone. They still need to be in the studio just to have people around them. And others, it's completely different. They became so much more effective when they were working from home. All of a sudden, I just saw their creative, you, everything just boomed, completely bloomed in an amazing ways. But I think the freedom is important. Uh, we have one thing, of course, as designers. When you're running a model, when you're part of the team, you have to be in the studio, right? Otherwise, it's extremely hard to run to
Mm.
run a model with a couple of modelers because you know uh, CAD, all that stuff, all great tools, but bottom line, and I think it's really hard to get out of it. Clay is still clay, and being there, handcrafting clay models, there's just nothing that beats it. And
Mm.
there's great CAD modelers, there's fantastic mills, amazing 3D printers, etc., etc., etc. Uh, but but building a clay model, a sculpture, it's like how do you beat that, right? So that
Because it's
you
just
have to,
tangible.
yeah, you have to be in the studio, right? But in between, I mean, I think freedom is the most important. And I think people should be working where they are inspired. That's what I learned from COVID. If they want to be in the studio, they should be in the studio. If they want to work from home, they should work from home. If they want to have mix, they should mix it. And
Have you tried like actually replacing clay models with just pure CAD and visualization? Like, have
yeah,
you experimented with that?
for since I started as a junior designer, it's always been the topic everywhere I've been. And I mean, clay has been around for over 100 years, right? In the automotive industry. I mean, if you're talking about transportation design, it's been around for over 100 years. And, there's been every 2, 3 years, someone is trying to get rid of it because they feel it's old, it slows you down, it's not good, it's faster in CAD, whatever. But as long as we're selling real products to people and not virtual products, you need to visualize that stuff. And there is just nothing still that beats clay and hand modeling. It's just you put part of your soul into a hand modeled clay model, right? And and you
How do you
you
like? I
don't
mean,
get me wrong. There's amazing CAD guys, and so I'm not dissing them or anything. That's not what I'm doing. But you still have to visualize it, and you have to see it. And clay is just an amazing material. It's like, how do you beat that? You know?
it sounds like you believe motorcycles have a kind of like distinct personality or a soul, like you just said. Like, how do you approach imbuing a machine with such an intangible quality?
I don't know. I mean, I grew up with motorcycles. I suck at everything else. If I hadn't been doing motorcycles, I don't know, I would probably be homeless or something. I have no idea. But I just, there's people that just don't have any other options, if you know what I mean. I'm probably one of them. So I never really thought about that. It's like, of course, a
But soul in a
motorcycle have
motorcycle,
soul.
like that's a yeah.
No, it's a
Does it
rolling,
come from
it's a rolling sculpture, and they all motorcycles I've ever been dealing with, they have personality,
rolling
right?
sculpture? That's a good one.
Yeah, but they also have personality. Like,
Mm.
I talked to another friend the other day. Is like, do you prefer kickstart or electric start? And it's like, well, nothing beats a kickstart a motorcycle because you got to know it, especially if you built it.
Until you
There's
fall over and you're stuck trying to get it started again in a race, and then it's not so good in a
no,
four
no,
stroke.
no. But you still got to know it. You got to know how to prime it. You got to know how,
Mm.
if it's a if it's a big V twin, like how many rotations you got to give, free kicks you got to give before it start. I think it's all personality, And to me, it just
Mm.
always felt like it's alive. I just, I don't know.
Yeah,
I
it's a
just
certain
always thought about
characteristic,
that.
isn't it? It
Yeah.
is, yeah.
And you always talk about the bike like this. Oh, today it's like it's really cranky. It doesn't want to start. It's moody. And you always describe a motorcycle with this personality traits. So I don't know. I just always looked at it like that. It's a living, breathing thing. So
It's good. I mean, that's probably what creates such attachment between people and the machines, because they do see it as a
yeah,
living thing, kind of like a horse. I mean, people
yeah,
through history had an attachment to a horse, and
yeah.
it is kind of like now your friend that you go on these rides with. I mean, it's the same with a bicycle too.
Is it? Yeah. Now that's interesting because I see my daughters obviously and my wife. They're into horses forever, but you kind of talk about them in the same way. You use the same words. I mean, me
Mm.
and the boys, we talk about the motorcycles with the same words they talk about horses. You're right. You're spot on.
So just to go completely 180 degrees from where we just were, like how much impact does the data and consumer trends and feedback have into a product? Like data is kind of the opposite of like soul almost.
Yeah, but no, you got to have that too to keep you grounded. And again, I'm just quoting someone that is way smarter than me, but someone said, but it was the CEO of like a big automotive company. He said, yeah, data, research, super, super important, but it still just holds up to 50%. The other
Mm.
50% is pure gut feeling. If you miss that, if you can't combine those two, you're not going to have a successful product. That was his recipe. And that guy obviously knew what he was doing. He had tons of very, very successful, he had a great career. So, I mean, I thought it was such a good quote because you can do all the data in the world and you can do all the focus groups you want. But, you know, if you don't know the product, if you don't live and breathe the product and you don't know it by heart, uh, and you can't represent the gut feeling, I think you're always going to have a huge issue. I've seen
How
so
do you?
many, so many, data vehicles completely fail in the market, right? You have too, I'm sure, and
Mm.
that's not the full answer. It's never going to be right. You got to have that gut feeling. You got to know where trends are going. You got to keep your ear to the ground. You just the stuff that you can't put your finger on. It's in your job and you know it. That's why you are where you are, right? That's why they picked you.
So
And
so there is a secret sauce when it comes to creating good designs, but
yeah,
basically you're
yeah.
saying it's secret.
Well, I think it's
We
that
can't actually.
part. Of course, you gotta do your education. You gotta have your mentors. You gotta learn how to design stuff. I mean, you've done all that stuff too, right? It's your foundation. But then there's this big part where it's like an iceberg, right? You always see the top of the iceberg, but it's all this stuff that is underneath that you
Mm.
know, is there. That's the part that gives you the brilliant idea when you wake up in the morning. The part when you were fighting for it the day before and trying to solve it, but you couldn't solve it, and you sleep on it, and then it's like you're just unlocking the doors to that big lump of iceberg underneath. It's subconscious, and it's okay. That's how it is. It's psychology, right? And but you
Have you
still
guys?
need the foundation. You need your education. You need your mentors. You need to understand design. But there's this big thing, and I just accepted it, right? It's this big part of the iceberg that it's there. I totally rely on it. I know it. It's fine. But that's where the secret sauce is. That's
Mhm.
your fingertip feeling, right? I think it's okay.
Do you have anybody in your team working on AI stuff, like using AI tools for any of the visualizations or
This is,
concepts? Or...
yeah, there's definitely, since it started popping up, people are experimenting and trying to figure out what this can be in the future. Um, so there's this part excitement, there's part curiosity, there's also people that are outright super scared of it because it's made to replace humans in a way. So I think this, yeah, there's a lot of discussion going on, and I hear it all over the industry too. I'm sure you do too, and
Mm.
uh, and we're just on the verge of it. So I think there's still so much more to explore and so much more that's going to happen. But it's, yeah, it's exciting, it's scary, it's curiosity, it's weird. It's I don't think anyone knows where it's going, but
Mm.
it's going to be an interesting journey to see.
I mean, definitely, if I think about design now relative to when I was younger, like it didn't really exist in its current form. Like so much of what I do now, when I was a kid, it just didn't exist. I mean,
Mm.
even I started off as a web designer. I mean, I have an industrial design degree, but then I got into
Yeah,
web
yeah,
design. Like web design didn't exist when I was a kid. It wasn't even
right.
on the radar. So, and then getting into like 3D modeling, that also didn't exist in the 70s, you know? And
No,
then
no, no,
like
no.
so much of what I do today, yeah, it wasn't around 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah,
And I just wonder what's going to be around in, 20, 30 years from today, that's not existing today. So,
I think I mean, I don't know. I think as long as it can stay a tool, it's okay. But when it crosses the bridge and becomes this automation where you just don't, like, you don't hardly have to input anything into the tool, then
mm,
it's like not a tool anymore. It's becoming something else. And
it loses the soul, maybe.
I think, yeah, that you're probably right. That's when the soul get lost, right? You still need a tool. You still need to know how to work it, right? Whatever tool it is, that's kind of signifies a tool, I guess. That you still need skill. You need to understand the tool, whether it's a pen or a hammer or whatever it is. It's a tool. You still need skill to maneuver it. Do you know what I
They
mean?
still have to be made as well. I think like, right now it's so superficial, like
Yeah,
the imagery that's created. And if you think about like the reality of actually, producing a motorcycle, engineering it, and then getting it all the parts in the supply chain put together and assembled. Like it's
yeah,
really, yeah, that's just another level that it's just so far
yeah.
away from right now.
Just I'm just thinking about, when I was still like a hands-on designer, like all the time we spend on the test track in testing facilities, out on the road, just testing stuff and understanding. I mean, that's a whole other level, right? So I think that'll
Mm.
be really hard. The other interesting, another on that note, I talked to another designer friend of mine, and he was like, "Oh yeah, but I love it because I'm so much faster now, and I can I can kind of control it with my own style, but I can generate so many more sketches because AI just does it for me. I just need to control where it goes." And it's like, yeah, but you know, the reason I became a designer is because I love to draw. And if I can't draw anymore, it just loses all that. Because for me, that's the magic, right? You draw something, you're projecting like these ideas, 3D ideas on a piece of paper, and then you bring it into 3D, and then eventually you can write that thing, But that thing from paper to the model to reality, and eventually actually writing. I mean, that's the magic to me. That pen and paper has been around forever, and there's something so tangible about that. When you work, when you're sketching, and if you take that away, I'm just like, wow, that's like, yeah, that's a good part of the soul, like you say. It's a lot of soul that just disappears from me right there. It's
Um,
yeah.
Going back to the team thing, because I'm fascinated with the way that you run these teams with yeah, like in such big companies. Like when you have conflicting viewpoints and all these different stakeholders, how do you manage all these different views? How do you avoid conflict within a team?
Oh wow.
Especially in motorcycles where people get really passionate, like you were saying, like it is a sport or an area which people really have strong feelings about. So,
I think as long as the passion is there, because now I'm thinking back, like all the discussions, of course, a lot of times, I guess that's our job as managers. We're presenting, we're pitching, we have to explain why this is a good design because you're showing stuff that has never been seen before, obviously. and you have to put it in context to what will happen in the future, and you have to paint the pictures and the scenarios for the leadership team. But as long as the passion is there, everyone is passionate about it, the discussions can be heated, that's fine. As long as people know what they're talking about, and they respect each other, and I never had a problem with that. When I had a problem is when there are people that have no fucking clue. And just because it says it on the business card, they think they know the industry, they know the people, they know the market, but they've been riding a motorcycle for 2 years. It's like, no, that doesn't make you, this sounds really bad, but that doesn't make you entitled to, have this discussion on this level. I'm sorry. It's like, it's so much more that goes into it, right? But luckily, like 99% in the motorcycle industry, they are there because they're so passionate about the product. And then those discussions are okay because everyone wants, the best of the best. And they live and breathe the customer experience. So it's fine,
Do you? I
you
mean,
know.
if incentives are aligned, then I think it's an easy road to navigate. But if you have, like if you have brand which has a certain agenda, and you have engineering which have another agenda, and then design has another agenda, maybe finance has another agenda,
Yeah,
supply
yeah,
chain has
no,
another agenda.
absolutely. But I think that's also, maybe I've been in big OEMs for too long, but that was always, at least for me, also the challenge. Well, I enjoyed that.
Mm.
It's that, what do you call it, like product balance, right? You have your target, you have your bill of materials, you have your business case, and you know there's a market, there's a spot, there's a place for this motorcycle, and you go in there and you try to solve this riddle, this uh, this mathematic uh, problem within those boundaries, and it's like, that's the challenge. I don't know, I always enjoyed that.
Can you share a time when you really had to fight for a design element that was particularly important to you, or you
I
got a
mean,
lot
it
of
happens,
pushback?
it happens all the time, there's no discussion. um, but again, like for me, it's like, as long as everyone's professional and they're passionate about the product, I'm okay with fighting for it, even if we don't agree. But because that happens on a daily basis, right? And I can't pick any one part, right, like out of my hat right now, because it is part of my daily job to do that, right? But I think you always have to, you can't just go, you have to keep the bigger, it sounds really boring, but you have to keep the bigger business objectives in the back of your head. You can't just stroll down on
Mm.
your lonely designer creative path and forget why you are doing this. You're doing this because you're creating a better motorcycle, and hopefully they will sell a whole bunch so you can design more motorcycles. Otherwise, you might just design that one bike that will be your first and your last, and it will be perfect. No one will buy it because it's too expensive, and that's that. You have to think bigger, and I think that's
I mean, that is
important.
a big part of your role, I guess. You are balancing all these different stakeholders and just making sure that they are all heard and that they will do all that input feeds into the final product.
I think, I mean, it's always a team, so I'm not alone. But what happens in design is, of course, that's the first time it's properly visualized. All the, like, the spec sheet, the research, all the stuff that goes into paper and CAD and this and that. But the first time the whole team, anyone in the company, actually sees it come to life, like right in front of you with paint and chrome and anodizing, and you can sit on it, you can, that happens in design, right? You probably have running demonstrator and prototypes before, but they're not made to look good. That's not the purpose of them. So they they look pretty shitty, or they look very complicated, whatever. That's fine, it's a demonstrator. But in design, like, all that stuff that you've been writing on the wall as the traits for the vehicle, and this, the scope of the bike, that's when it comes together and get it's visualized. like in 3D, right in front of you. You can touch it, you can sit on it. So of course, in design, in the viewing yard, that's when it becomes real for the first time for everyone in the team. You know what I mean? So yes, there's going to be heated, passionate discussions, and that's okay, you know. And
Do you have like sometimes if you have like an idea for a new product, do you always have to then create a clay model in order to sell it through, or can you just create like a concept sketch or like a 3D model and then sell it through, or does it normally have to get to the point where you have a physical model before everybody kind of buys into the idea and actually thinks about commercializing it?
I I think just models are just way more powerful. Sketches are great, but big OEMs often get a little bit spoiled. They see a lot of flashy, nice sketches all the time on the wall, and I think it's hard if you're a CEO and you walk into design studio. There's so much stuff on the wall. I think it's hard to like filter through because it all looks great, you know, especially in sketches. And some of the designs can also, you know, you talked about the R9T. It was one of those, like, or now at Indian, when you look at look the chief that we picked for the bike, the sketch was it was a nice sketch, but it was like a super nice, clean bike, great proportion. But like sketches, there were a whole bunch of other sketches that were way more exciting. But as a designer, you got to
Mm-hmm.
filter through that. And I think a lot of people, when I started pushing for that one chief sketch from Rich Christoph, that I like, this is the new chief. This is what we should be doing. I was like, yeah, but it like looks kind of like, you know, it's not boring, but it's a little bit like, you know, look at these other sketches. You know, yeah, but that one has the proportion, it has the bones. This is it. And then when we built it up as a model, and people walk in, and it's like, God damn, this is just beautiful. And they weren't sold by the sketch, but when they saw it in the flesh, when we had built the first model and it was all painted and nice and shiny, and you know, then it was just absolutely stunning. And everyone
So
was
did
like,
you already
wow.
visualize it in your mind? Is the reason why you picked that sketch is because you actually knowing 3D models or knowing clay models so well and having a good
E-
like mental
e-
ability to visualize something in 3D. Like you knew that in 3D that sketch would look really good, whereas other people they maybe didn't, and they were judging it purely based on 2D.
Yeah, I think if you're a designer, you're trained to do that. So I think all designers, I mean, we picked that as a team too, but everyone saw the same thing as I did. Like, you know, they saw that's like super clean, really nice. It has amazing proportions. And yeah, you're right. This is the one we're gonna build. But if you're in the leadership team and you're not in the studio all day long, and this is not your job, right? Then it's hard to see that. You might fall for a super flashy sketch because it's flashy and cool and exaggerated and, you know, cheated a little bit. And I think, yeah, that's if you're a trained designer, but that's also when you have to talk and kind of convince the leadership team that's like, no, you got to trust me. But that's where the model becomes so important. Like full circle back to the model. It's like every bike I've ever done that was like on the fence, like as soon as you build it up and it sits there, nice paint, nice chrome, nice anodizing, whatever you have, you know, but it's real, and you can, that's when the soul starts to shine through. And it's not always it shines through in the sketch, even if the sketch is beautiful. Um, but models, I think they're absolutely essential to sell and to pitch. Especially it's like if it's um, yeah, if there's any doubt, you know, then yeah, nothing beats it. Actually, in general, nothing beats models. It's just the coolest
so,
thing. That's when it comes to
so
life.
just completely switching gears, I wanted to just discuss supply chain briefly, just because it's such a kind of difficult topic nowadays. I mean, it
Oh
is in
yeah.
the bicycle industry, presumably it is for you. Do you see any shift towards like localizing supply chains, or do you think that that's a pipe dream and actually,
Ooh.
like there's too much quality and it's still cheaper to make stuff in Asia. It's closer to the raw materials a lot of the time, so like localizing supply chains is not really realistic.
No, I think it is. I This sounds, again, it sounds probably very politically correct, but I think you need a healthy mix of both.
Mm.
because I've seen parts where you have huge issues when they're too far away, and it becomes very difficult to fix quality issues or fix the dynamic of just the supply, supply and demand, and it can be very, very difficult. And other parts, it's the total opposite. Like you just can't control the cost if you do it in Europe or the States, and that's of course when it's much easier to do it, abroad. Uh, but
Mm.
it's got to be, I think it's got to be a mix of both, or at least that's my experience. When you have a healthy mix of both, then uh, yeah, you're not painted into a corner, and that's when you can get your business case rolling and you can get the best solution for every part and every system. And
Are you like in general, are you designing products for specific markets or are you trying to make global products? So, I
I
mean,
mean, we see
specifically with
us. I
Lorry.
mean, we totally see us as a global player, absolutely, and that's why we're putting so much focus also on the global market, because it's very easy to just, if you do cruisers and touring bikes, to be very America focused. But I don't know the mix right now, but I mean, it's probably 40% is outside of the States. So
Mm.
but we definitely see us as a global company, and that's what we're pushing really hard every day to be. So that's very important.
So, okay, just a couple of quick questions to finish off because I'm sure your time is precious. What are you most,
I warn you. I'm the slowest to answer quick questions. So just a
Ola, you've been
heads up.
brilliant. Thank you. No, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. It's been ages since we actually talked in person. So,
Yeah, it's
um,
it's crazy. Yeah, you
yeah.
still have hair and color, and I'm just getting more and more gray though. It kind of sucks.
Sure, mine's going to either fall out or grow grey at some point. No, you're looking good. You're looking healthy. Yeah. So, what are you most optimistic about right now? Are
uh,
you optimistic on the motorbike industry in general?
yeah, yeah, I
Yeah.
am, because you have to think back to when I started. This makes me feel so damn old though. But uh, when I got out of school, and my first motorcycle job was actually Indian Motorcycles, right? The first time they
Oh,
started up
cool.
again, and then BMW, and I did a lot of freelance work for Olins too while I worked at Saab. So I always, was in the industry. I always wanted to do motorcycles, but back then it was really shitty. Like there was like no hope. You know what? But I was burning for motorcycles, and that's all I wanted to do. But when I got into the industry, like everyone was pretty, yeah, it was heavy. Like no new people, no new blood. Everyone just got 1 year older every year, and it's like this is a dying industry. But then something
Mm,
happened, right? And especially with the new custom scene and all of that, and there's just so much more. It doesn't matter if it's like, you're in Italy and you see all these kids on scooters and having passion for scooters again, or if you go to India and you just have this, not just commuters, but you have all these young people that actually not just commuting on bikes, but they love their motorcycle. They're passionate about it. And also in the cruiser scene, the whole performance bagger scene and stunt scene, and you go to Wheels and Waves, and it's like all of a sudden there's hope again. And to be part of the industry, when to see that change, it was really cool. Because when I started, everyone was struggling to figure out like how can we get more blood into this industry, more people, like what are we gonna
mm.
do? And everyone was trying weird concepts, but nothing hit. And then it kind of came in through the back door, especially with the neo retro bikes. So no, I'm positive. And the other thing that is really cool is to be allowed to be part of this whole electric revolution, because you know having been through all these cycles, plus being part of like putting in the first bricks in this new building, that's pretty damn cool. So it's super super exciting. So yeah, definitely, there's tons of hope.
So, what advice would you give to a young designer who's looking to break into the industry? like you were back in the day?
I think it's like any, whether you want to do cars or bikes or products, whatever, or bicycles, whatever you want to do, you you just got to double down and you got to work really fucking hard. There's like there's no there's no other way to, there's no easy way into this industry, right? You got to be so damn passionate and you got to work really fucking hard and you got to sketch, 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 sketch. That's what you got to do. Very simple.
What, just making it a little bit more personal for yourself. Like, what advice would Ola give an 18-year-old Ola?
Like,
What advice would you give
don't,
yourself?
yeah, don't give up. Like, don't give up on your dreams. And there, again, just you got to work hard. And there's going to be a lot of sleepless nights, but if you land a job in this industry, you're not going to work another day in your life, right? It's this classic one because, I still go to work and you have to pinch yourself in the arm that it's like, what the fuck? Someone is actually paying me to do this stuff. I do the same stuff that I did in kindergarten. Like, it's
Yeah.
ridiculous. It's amazing. It's like, what the hell, But it's a lot of hard work to get there, for sure. And there's no easy way in, You can't just come surfing along and no, you gotta have talent, you gotta have passion, but you just gotta work really hard. It's what it is. And sketch.
Was it the
And
Einstein
sketch.
quote? Like, success is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration.
Yeah, yeah. And what was it? We had Ingemar Stenmark, the skier. He always said, "I'm just lucky." He won a bunch of whatever slalom, and yeah, I'm just lucky. But you know what? It seems like the more I practice, the luckier I get. I was like, "That's cool.
Isn't that the truth?
That's so true." So
Awesome,
no,
Ola. Look, thank you very much for the chat today.
yeah, good to see you,
Really
man. It's
appreciate
been a
it. And
while.
yeah, it's been a while. Hopefully, we'll see. Are you going to EICMA or something like that?
I think this year I'm still on crutches for quite a while. Maybe I can make EICMA. We'll see. But I'll
Cool.
hit you up if I'm there for sure. So
Awesome. Stay in touch, man. Thank you very
we
much.
do for sure. Take care, buddy. See you soon.
Take care. Cheers.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.